Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of SEOs Getting Coffee. And this one is super exciting because we have no other than Patrick Hathaway with us, who is the co-founder and CEO of the amazing SEO tool called Sitebulb. So if you haven't checked out Sitebulb, this is your chance to do it. Patrick, do you want to introduce
Welcome,
yourself
Patrick.
quickly?
Hi, thanks for having me. So I'm co-founder and CEO of Sitebulb, and I'm involved in almost every part of the business, but I don't really do any one thing just on my own, other these days than sales. So I get involved with now support, I get involved with the design, the product, the dev team, and marketing, but we now have a team that does all those things much better than me, and so I kind of help along with bits and pieces. And I've started doing sales as a result of about a year ago we launched a cloud version of Sitebulb. So people tend to want to talk about that because it's a more considered purchase. It's a higher price point, and so I've just got off a sales call before we had our meeting today, our podcast recording. So
And
that's what I tend to do.
straight from sales into JavaScript for SEO, which is quite, because today we're going to be talking about JavaScript, which is, I have to say, my nerdy soul kind of flutters every time I hear JavaScript. I do like it. I mean, I like learning about it, so I'm super excited to have you with us. Are we equipped with the coffees? We have coffee mugs, everybody. I always forget that bit.
Yeah,
Excellent.
I just made myself a flat white with just enough time to do it. So
good. Brilliant.
Very
Brilliant.
good.
So ready for the Java conversation. So let's start with something like that's pretty basic, but often kind of there's a bit of questions even in the SEO community around it. So how does actually Google crawl and render? And particularly when it comes to JavaScript, and how has that evolved throughout the years? Because it has. I mean, before it was very, very different.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, and we know this as well from building a crawler. Like we've built a crawler designed to replicate in the way that Google crawls. And when we first launched our crawl in 2017, we had two modes. We had a JavaScript crawling mode and we had an HTML crawling mode. And we were the first tool to do that when we launched in beta, even though some other tools may have publicly launched a version that they were selling that did it later that year. But and so we know, that how it's changed from that perspective, and we know how basic, I suppose, our JavaScript crawler was at the beginning, and essentially the how things have evolved has gone from the equivalent of crawling based essentially on that raw response HTML, right? Which the sort of traditional thing that SEOs would do if they wanted to understand the HTML on a page would be to go on the web page, click view source, and look through the HTML there. And genuinely, I know this from do Sitebulb support. There are lots of SEOs that will still do that.
It. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And they'll still use that as the sort of source of truth. And it's no longer an adequate way to look at things because of how Google have evolved their methodology in crawling, which is now they do look at that response HTML. They do pass that HTML and they use it to look at a couple of things. They want to check if the page is indexable, so like it's not got a no index on there, and they want to go and grab all the links. So they want to see if they've got href references that they can take those URLs and shove them back in the crawl queue to start crawling as soon as possible. But then the page is passed through to a renderer, and then rendering happens, at which point they're updating their index with more links that they found, obviously content that's been updated, anything that's changed during that rendering process. And that's what then goes into the index. So if you only ever look at the view source portion and don't look at the HTML after rendering's happened, you're missing out on a big chunk of stuff in between. And essentially that's what the crawlers are designed to do. Almost all of the crawlers, I think, these days have got two versions that you can use. You can crawl with what we call our HTML crawler, that's like the equivalent of ViewSource, or what we call our Chrome crawler, which is crawling and rendering JavaScript, and then it's looking at data as a user would see it in the browser as well.
Yeah, and this was on the browser level. That's the difference, from what I understand, between ViewSource and using, for example, Inspect, because Inspect is, yeah, and we were talking about this on the publishers webinar that we did together, how for news publishers, for example, this is why that first crawl before the rendering is so important. This is why everything needs to be in HTML, because, by the time it comes to rendering, top news, discovery, everything is gone, really. So
yeah, I mean, and if you go and look at Google's docs, they literally have separate docs regarding JavaScript for publishers, because and which is sort of an admission in some ways that the rendering doesn't happen fast enough, and so they know it doesn't, because they can't keep up with the pace that news changes. So it is so important, yeah. And if anyone doesn't know what we're talking about, we had a Sitebulb webinar recently on publishing SEO, which you can find on our website, which Amina was one of the guests, very kindly joined and shared a whole load of stuff about that, and also a series of articles on our website, specifically about publishing SEO, and covers JavaScript in a whole load of detail there as well.
Well, thank you. No, it was great to participate. And I think, coming back to what you were saying about documentation, so we know that Google has a ton of documentation, and hopefully people have read the documentation. Now, there's the question what the documentation said, and do we actually believe the documentation? And you said, rightfully so, there's this kind of mismatch between, no problem, we have no problem with rendering JavaScript, but then there's a special consideration for news publishers and big sites. So how much do you believe them? What should we believe?
Well, I think the thing is, it's different for each site. And like, if you have sites that don't have a large dependence on JavaScript, it's not going to be so much of a big deal. And if you have a site with a huge dependence of JavaScript, hopefully you're going to be aware of it and you're going to pay attention. And I think it's the in-between cases that will cause issues, or tend to cause issues. It's where there are parts of the website or parts of certain pages that have elements controlled by JavaScript or being updated by JavaScript that things can start to fall down the cracks, because you're maybe not always aware of it. You're maybe not aware of what's happening, or where things are going wrong. But the sorts of things that we've seen, and our users have reported seeing, is page titles that are changing for one reason or another, that are then not getting updated quickly enough in the SERPs. So it could be a news story, or it could be like a product, or it could be a review, it could be anything like that. If it's getting updated by JavaScript and Google are then not quickly enough updating the rendered version into the SERPs, then they're not seeing what you want them to see, essentially. And it's those sorts of mismatches. And so a title's one thing, but if it's an indexing signal, like if it's a no index, or if it's a canonical, or something like that, which could have a huge impact on whether pages are actually ending up in the index or not. If you have JavaScript that is modifying these, adding, removing these elements, these crucial DOM elements, then you could end up, in a difficult situation, and again, not necessarily having clarity about what's going on and why things are happening as well.
Yeah, so those are kind of some of the issues that arise. What other, come on, give us the tea. What else have you seen, Patrick? What are some of the other issues that you've encountered? I'm sure that there were loads of them.
I mean, the worst ones that, don't know. The thing is, because I don't do agency work anymore. I'm not auditing sites. Most of my information is third hand, right? It's people telling me stories that they've seen, and again, because I'm now doing these sales calls, often it comes up like how are you dealing with rendering, or how are you dealing with JavaScript. And there was one of the companies that I was speaking to reasonably recently as well. Essentially, they have some of the site using server-side rendering, but not all of it. And they had certain instances where the server-side rendering failed, and they were just having blank pages that were just being delivered, and they didn't realize for days. And these were the product page. Like there was a huge amount of revenue and impact that was associated with this issue, and they didn't know about it. And like, and like, so again, like server-side rendering as a sort of panacea type solution, well, it is not even often the case as well. Like it's still something you need to really keep auditing and keep paying attention to, because you can't just rely on everything to just work automatically, I guess.
And that's really interesting. I mean, for people who are not familiar with it, it would maybe be good to kind of think about defining the terms. So there's server-side rendering, but then there's also client-side rendering. What's the difference, just quickly, so that everybody is
Yeah, no, I mean it's essentially the difference between relying on your browser to perform the rendering, or relying on a service in between to perform the rendering and then serve the rendered HTML. So I expect, I don't actually know the figures on it, but I think that most of the time what we see is client-side rendered. The developers putting stuff on the website, expecting the user's browser to do the work to render all the content. I think that's what we see most of the time, and that's probably the thing that you will have experienced, or most SEOs will have experienced most of the time. Server-side rendering is expensive, so it's not something that you see as much, for sure.
Yeah. This was my experience as well. It's interesting.
Patrick, why do you think we are seeing more JavaScript issues these days rather than less?
Well, I just think it's the rise of JavaScript itself. I think JavaScript has pretty much taken over as the main language of the web, and a lot of that's got to do with React becoming easier to use and more accessible. And I think that the way that people are learning web development these days kind of starts with JavaScript, and they're not always learning HTML in the way that they would previously. And so there's more complicated websites. And like the frustrating thing is that you often see it with the bigger brands. Like they've got these all singing, all dancing websites that do all sorts of fancy things. Jewelers websites are often particularly bad. Car websites, where it's like a big purchase, and maybe they don't, some of them at least don't rely on SEO that heavily anyway. But you certainly see this stuff, and it's like, developers have come up with a solution that does look nice and works. It's cool and interactive. It does all the things that you want it to do, but it's causing a lot of problems that aren't visible to developers who don't care or aren't conditioned to look for SEO issues, I suppose.
I think those trends, I think like the impact of like those trends that are set by like the bigger brands with like new websites and redesigns and things. So like the Apple website, I think, is one that gets brought up a lot of the time because everyone loves the way that it looks and the way that, you go in there, it's an experience. And I think that kind of trickles down over like the next few years of like a trend of like how people design websites, but then it kind of has an impact on like, these small and medium businesses that you might be doing SEO work for, that actually you're trying to explain to them, well, we've got a bit of a problem here because like, we're not kind of seeing what we need to see or Google's not seeing what it needs to see. And like, because it's all based on design and it's not actually based on like the technical SEO side of thing, what we actually want to try and optimize towards, or so it can like, that people's knowledge of that, I guess, is that it kind of makes it even more inaccessible to kind of start to try to get results, I guess, in a way, because of those kind of design trends. In terms of like, how has that made it like technical SEO more complicated, I guess, over time? Or do you think it has made,
Oh, I definitely think it has. I think technical SEO has got a lot more complicated, and I think JavaScript's got a lot to do with it. As much as anything, what we were saying before, when you would go and look at view source, like that was what was being used,
It
right?
was enough, yeah, because
It
they
was
were all
enough.
HTML static websites, so everybody was used to it. Now,
But now, even if you do go and inspect element and look at, right, what does the rendered HTML look like? There's lots of considerations, like has the page even finished loading yet, and what elements might still be getting loaded as you're looking at it, right? And so you don't even necessarily know if the snapshot that you're looking at is the same snapshot that Google's looking at. How long are they waiting for it to render? If there's, I mean, we see lots and lots and lots of sites through Sitebulb where someone will come to us and say, "Oh, this doesn't look right," or "This looks a bit weird," or something like that, and they're not really sure what sort of results they're looking at, and we'll look at the website and be like, bloody hell, like this website, it's awful. Like there's so much stuff being loaded in, and they're just horrendous, and like it's no wonder that you might have indexing issues because Google can't get to half the content, or it's just taking so long to load.
Yeah, we had
And it's so opaque. I think that's the problem as well. It's so difficult to get from, well, again, if you're trying to understand what is being changed by JavaScript, you can't really like inspect the scripts, or most SEOs don't really know what's going on. I certainly don't, and like I'm reasonably technical, but I'm not. I expect I'm not as technical as you, Amina, and like I'm not able to say this has done this, this script has caused this, and I think that is the is the part where it starts getting tricky, because I personally believe that SEOs should be able to communicate well with developers, and that requires a sort of a base level of understanding and knowledge and confidence in what you're looking at, and to be able to communicate well. JavaScript is having this impact, and not necessarily, oh, it's this script or that script or this is exactly what's happening, but at least to be able to raise that this has happened as a result of something that JavaScript has changed, and this is the impact, and this is particularly the SEO impact, because it now means X, Y, or Z. But I do think it's so opaque.
Yeah, and it's interesting because one of the things that you were saying, it's that relationship with the developer that is really important. And one of the pitfalls really is websites that don't get the SEO involved quickly enough, whether they're migrating or it's a new website. And then you have this mismatch between, so you have a developer, particularly in smaller and medium businesses, you have a developer, you haven't put like a massive amount of money into it, you don't have the budget, you want the bells and whistles on your website because you want it to look cool and engaging and whatnot. And you bring in an SEO later on and it's done. It's already like the poop has landed. So, it's kind of, which it's too late, but then it's too late. You have to be careful when you're like designing a website. From the get-go, you need to be thinking about the SEO elements. Would you agree with that? I mean, this is my experience. I hate it when I'm doing, when I'm like dropped into it somewhere at the end where everything has been done, and then it's like a push and pull. Really.
Yeah, because it should be a balancing act. It should be, okay, well, we want this functionality, but it shouldn't be at the expense of these elements in particular. And it's not just like the technical SEO or sort of the on-page signals. It's also things like the page performance and how essentially how fast it loads, or how fast users feel it loads. And I know there was a sort of a load of noise about Core Web Vitals a few years ago, which to some extent has died down. But it's only really when you see particularly bad sites that you realise sort of kind of, I suppose, why Google made such a big deal about it. Like if you ever go on those local news sites, they are just awful to. They're just a horrendous experience, particularly on mobile. It's just ad after ad after ad. There's things pushing you around all over the place. And it's really with anything like that, it needs to be a balancing act, and it needs to be a conversation with development and product teams to say, well, ad revenue is important. Like if we don't make money, then no one has jobs. So we can't just go, we'll get rid of all the ads just because we want to make core web vitals quicker. And similarly, you can't just say, well, it needs to do everything needs to be now available in static HTML. And you've lost all your interactive elements that help conversion rates, for example. And so you can't just come in and go, well, we just need to change absolutely everything. And like you say, it's much more difficult to sort of unpick things after it's been built than being involved from the beginning and having the considerations at the start and having those conversations at the start.
Yeah, exactly. And kind of working together with the developer.
Yeah.
I'm not a developer, so I'm expecting I'm learning from my developer, I'm looking at what the company wants, what and what is good for SEO. And then I'm working with the developer to find some kind of like balancing act and something
Compromise,
in between,
yeah.
a compromise. Funnily enough, I logged into, what's it called? The CMS is called Statamic. Have you worked with it? I've never worked with it. And the website, when I saw the website, I thought, oh my God, like, honestly, it's so like, there's so many animations, there's so many kind of interactive elements to it. So I thought, oh, this is going to be a nightmare. Funnily enough, I ran it just quickly to see on the homepage what's going on with the performance. It's massive. So there are ways of doing this. If you have a good developer who can do it in a way where it doesn't hurt performance, it is possible. But that's why you have to kind of bring in an SEO early, or it's a roulette. Will I get a developer that's going to do that by default, or will I get somebody who's going to be doing it quickly and not considering the SEO side? So, yeah, it's good. Sean, did you have any more? I had a few more questions.
It is like a compromise, I guess, just on that, and I think I'm thinking to like some of the recent like site migrations and things that we've worked on where you kind of go in and you kind of have to explain that, none of these headings, are just are kind of displaying, if we take out, JavaScript, and it's kind of, it's all a learning curve. And I think that you do just obviously have to work with the developer, and you really do have to kind of collaborate and compromise, I think. But who doesn't love a flashy website? Who doesn't love like all of these transitions? And like, it looks great, but I think, you have got to kind of bring, the SEO and whoever in really to kind of say, well, look, what is possible? I mean, it's not just us, but it's obviously the whole team needs to work together on these things, to kind of say, well, look, it's all well and good, but we can maybe have a little bit of this, but actually we need to try and make sure that we still drive organic traffic to the website because, that's where some of our revenue comes from, right? So, but happy to move on to the next question, Amina.
So I had a question around kind of JavaScript is such a big, it's a field of its own in technical. But what are some of the kind of the most important things that SEOs should remember when it comes to JavaScript? We spoke about some of them, but it would be great to kind of, have your like top 3, 4 for anybody listening.
Yeah, I think fundamentally the first and most important thing is understanding how much of the site is dependent upon JavaScript. And so that kind of starts with what kind of tech stack they're using. So is it a single page application? Are there elements that are coming in through JavaScript? Is there nothing, or very, very little? And like before you start dealing with a website, you don't really know any of these questions. And so there's a discovery phase that you need to do, that you can't just go out the door. Like, back in the day, you could understand like the sort of breadth of the site you were looking at simply by crawling, with like the HTML crawler, and you go, all right, well, there's the universe of pages that I'm dealing with. I know the structure, I know the size of the site. With JavaScript, you need to think a little bit more outside the box, because if there are links that are being loaded in by JavaScript and these aren't loading in enough time, then you're not actually seeing the whole website and you don't really know the breadth of the site. So it is important that you spend a bit of time at the beginning trying to figure out those, particularly those questions. And then it's essentially it's what elements are being changed by JavaScript. So have you got pages that have some of those, the key indexing signals that are getting updated by JavaScript? So your meta robots and canonicals, hreflang, right? Is JavaScript having an impact on any of those things? The first and foremost, I would say those things, because if something doesn't get indexed, it's never going to rank. So right, you can't really get any further than that. And so I would start there, but then you also want to know about content elements. So are there page titles, meta descriptions, H1s, and then key content blocks? If that stuff's being rendered by JavaScript, and if it is, right, okay, have you got any problems with that? Have you got pages on the website that the start of the page is that content is indexed, but content further down the page isn't? And so all of those things are kind of, I would say, almost like table stakes these days. Like if you're not thinking about these things, including these things in your audit, you are probably missing stuff. And then after that, it's sort of, have you got actual issues happening? Like, are there links with on-click attributes, right? Where Google's not going to process them or find them, or have you got like literal JavaScript errors that are causing the JavaScript not to fire properly on the page and missing out on loads of stuff? Or have you got issues like I mentioned before, where server-side rendering is failing and you're getting empty pages and blank pages? Like, all of those things will take a bit more delving and diving in. So I would say that they're sort of secondary steps, but it's a bit of an onion you need to peel, I would say. And the more you do, the better you'll understand the site and how the site hangs together. So yeah, that's probably where I would start thinking about it.
And obviously that changes how we audit websites as well, doesn't it?
Sure.
It's no longer enough to just, so you do one audit and then you're set for the foreseeable future. Tell us a little bit about that, kind of the audited side of things. What are your top tips?
So we, in Sitebulb, we completely rebuilt our what we call our response versus render report, which basically takes that view source, takes that inspect element, and goes, what are the differences between these two? So it will do some of that discovery work for you. It doesn't stop you from requiring to also have a look at the website yourself and see what's going on, but it will help with a load of that work. And at a bare minimum, every single site that you deal with for the first time, I would always crawl with JavaScript crawling now. Always check and figure out. And then you don't always have to, moving forward, you use JavaScript crawling. For example, the Sitebulb site has a very little dependence on JavaScript. So I know that I don't need to always crawl this site with JavaScript. Right, I don't need to always use the Chrome crawler because it's got such a small amount of dependence on JavaScript. And once you know that, you can go forward with that knowledge. So I think that's always going to be the first and most important thing, and then sort of secondarily is regularly checking this stuff, because for any site that is having regular work done by developers, any of these things could be breaking. So like the sort of old school way of thinking, certainly when I entered the industry over a decade ago, was an agency or a consultant would start working with a new client. They'd do a technical SEO audit, come up with a set of recommendations and go, right, that's what you do. They either did or didn't do the recommendations, often didn't do them.
Didn't do them, yeah.
But regardless, you'd sort of go, well, that deliverable has been delivered. We're now going to get on with link building and all the rest of it. And you might not audit that site again for another year, maybe never again, right? Like your technical side of things is tackled by the audit, and then you move on to the offsite stuff. I just don't think that's adequate anymore. Like you really do need to be staying on top of this and monitoring these things. If SEO is an important, if organic is an important channel, because you don't know what things might be changing or what things might be getting affected by rendering.
Especially with like the amount of contributors as well to sites these days. So
Yeah.
that you might have internal teams. Like I know, a lot of our clients are on WordPress, and they'll have all types of page builders which enables obviously people to come in and create their page, but then you might kind of find in a couple of months' time there's an extra 15, 20 pages that have been created, and then you have to check those because obviously someone's come in with maybe putting things on which aren't the best practice. So it's particularly important, I think. Kind of moves just finally before obviously we move on to room 404. I think it would be really good to kind of touch on like how is SEOs, because you've done obviously some research at Sitebulb around the technical SEO kind of industry, I guess, and all of us SEOs, like how well and how confident we are in our knowledge of JavaScript. I think if you are kind of looking to learn more, like how can an SEO learn more about JavaScript and how to audit Java, how to audit through JavaScript, and where can they go to find more information?
Yeah. So we have, as you say, we've got at the start of August, we're releasing a study that we've done that I know the results of now because I've looked at them. But it sort of reveals some really interesting things, to do with
truth.
So genuinely, like how many people, for instance, have read Google's documentation about JavaScript and like kind of where the knowledge gaps are. And I feel like there are a significant amount of knowledge gaps. And so that report's coming out at the end of, at the start of August. And if you want to find out about that, if you just go onto our website, you can go and find our sign up to our newsletter. You'll hear about it in that. But as a result of that work, we've also just started working with Women in Tech SEO. So we're recent Women in Tech SEO partners.
Yay! Well done, Patrick.
And we're working on a project with Sam Torres and Tori Gray from 𝗀𝗽𝗲𝗁𝗀, who are geniuses and brilliant, in particular at sort of breaking down these relationships between sort of SEOs and developers and clients in between, and helping users understand or helping us SEOs even understand how to find and report on JavaScript issues. And so as a result, sort of turning off the back of that study, we're working with those guys to produce a training on JavaScript SEO in particular. So there's already lots of stuff on our blog. There's the stuff that Amina's contributed. There is a post on how to audit JavaScript websites from Sam Torres. There is a few articles on there that I've written myself on all of this sort of stuff that you can go and find. We've got quite a lot of stuff on there now, essentially because we've realized that it's really is an area that seems to be a bit of a knowledge gap and seems to be something that people need. And on top of that, sorry, I just forgot one other thing. We did a webinar recently with 𝗀𝗲𝗻𝗄, with Sam, and with Arnaud Hellemans, where we kind of dug into it. To some extent, it got a little bit more technical, but we dug into some gnarly issues that folks have been seeing, and kind of how those guys tackle that communication bit with their clients. So again, go and find that stuff on our website. There's loads there. There's loads to learn, but I don't think it's insurmountable by any stretch. And I think there's a few key important things that we all need to get better at. And I think it starts with like that auditing practices, and then it follows through to actually how we communicate with clients. So again, that the course that Sam and Tori putting together will cover all those things. So so go and find what's on our site and sign up, and you'll hear all about that.
Yeah, and it's good. One of the things, I know you guys have loads of like resources, but in terms of the tool, I'd like to, I'm very excited about seeing how that translates into some of you have really helpful guides within the tool, and kind of everything is communicated in a way that it's quite understandable for no matter what your level is, which helps you with clients, obviously. So it's going to be interesting. Are you planning to kind of tweak the tools as well and kind of looking at how you provide that support as part of this project.
Yep, yeah, there's plenty of plans. I mean, there's 2-3 years worth of dev roadmap already. But yeah, we're always looking really at ways that we can help kind of break down those barriers and make technical SEO easier to understand.
Yeah, it's needed. It's definitely needed. All right, so we are now at a time where we finish on a low, not high. We're going to be bouncing something into our room 404. For anybody who is not aware, our room 404 is this dark and dingy place where we put things that have annoyed us in life or this week, or connected to digital marketing or not connected to digital marketing. Some of the stuff in there has been in there for a long time. Last time we spoke about putting GA4 into a 410. I think that's something that has to be done. But Patrick, you have the privilege today to banish something into room 404.
Excellent. Thank you. What an honor. What really pisses me off, and it's a bit like the news sites we were talking about before, like where my dad will complain about them, right? Like, oh God, they're just awful to use. And what really, really annoys me is where SEO stuff bleeds over into normal search behavior and makes their lives noticeably worse. So we could start talking about AI, but let's not, because we'll be here all day. So I'll steer clear of that, but I want to talk about something that we've had for years. It's not a recent thing, but I hate recipe search results.
God, I hate them too.
With a
By
passion.
the time you get to the recipe, honestly, I mean, but just at least give me some jump links to go into the. Oh, that's a good one.
Right. I mean, so I love cooking, right? I do cook. I cook all the time. I do baking, make coffee, all sorts. So I love a cookbook. But I also Google stuff. I've got random things in the fridge. What can I make, right? So I'm Googling recipes all the time, and I can't remember the last time I found one that was like a pleasant to read, because you're scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. And why this pisses me off most is, all right, it annoys me, but it's when it starts annoying everybody else. And so I was chatting with one of my friends the other day, and he had some recipe. I can't remember. It was like from uni or something, that he used to make this chocolate crunch cake or something. And I was like, "Oh, send me the recipe." And I was like, "Oh, I don't know if I've got it anymore. I'll find one online and send it to you, right?" And so he sent me a message that said, "Here is the recipe. I don't know why it needs a story." And I was like, "Oh God, yeah, we did that, right? SEO has caused this."
Yeah.
Sorry, it just sucks, right? That this stuff's rewarded in the SERPs. So
Yeah.
I want to lock recipe search result or recipe pages in room 404, and then replace them with recipes that have the recipe at the beginning,
Yeah.
but not AI ones. I still don't want them.
Yeah, it's interesting because we could have a whole new episode around like kind of playing around with testing these type of things, and it really pisses me off that people still, there's this fallacy about, oh, it doesn't have to be long form content, really, it just needs to answer the intent right away, and then you see stuff like that and you're like, what?
Yeah,
no,
bullshit.
it's just it's BS. So yes, into room 404. I mean, part of me wants it in 410 immediately. However, we don't have a room 410 officially, so we can only put it into room 404. Thank you, Patrick. Do you have anything else to kind of say, or anything that you want to add?
No, I mean the like I say, our big push in the next few weeks is going to be this JavaScript SEO report. So keep your eye out for it. We think it's got some really interesting data in it, really interesting results, and like I say, the sort of training off the back of that again should be great. So yeah, I think if pay attention to that, and I would be very happy.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I'm waiting eagerly to see and test
Good.
myself, probably.
Well, so I think we've already had a slight sneak preview, so I think it's I think that everybody's going to be really excited to see that, and we can vouch for that. It's something to check out. Patrick, where can everybody find you online on your socials and things?
Sure, I'm on X now. They've updated all the links, it looks like. I can't even say the word anymore. So Hathaway, at Hathaway P, you can find me there. I'm also now increasingly on LinkedIn, much more than I was. I think it's just Patrick Hathaway on LinkedIn, pretty sure. So you can find me in both of those places. Don't really hang out anywhere else, so find me there and chat. I'll get back to you. Have a conversation about JavaScript.
Excellent. We'll put some links as well in the episode for people to have a look at, particularly the webinar that you did with the amazing team at 𝗀𝗽𝗲𝗁𝗀. And it's in my calendar. I still haven't watched it, but I know.
Oh, you shared it. Was good. It was a good one. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Patrick,
Thank you
for coming for this brilliant chat about JavaScript.
Thank you very much for having me and honouring my Room 404 suggestion. I appreciate that.
That was such a good one. Such a good one. Thank you, everybody, for listening today, and join us for the next SEOs Getting Coffee and find out what next is going into Room 404. Bye, everyone.
See you later.
Cheers. Bye-bye.